Welcome to the Lawns and Life podcast, where DIYers go to get the tips and advice they need to have a great looking lawn. Well, hey there, lawn lovers. Welcome back to another exciting episode of the Lawns and Life podcast, where we dive deep into the world of DIY lawn care. Whether you're just starting out or a seasoned veteran looking to polish your skills, we have got something for everyone. In each episode, I break down simple, easy to understand topics that will empower you to achieve your dream lawn. My name is Devin. I am the DIY lawn coach, and thank you so much for coming back for another week. Hope you guys are doing well. Hope things are going well for you. It's been another great week. I was able to travel this week for my job. Went up to Roanoke, Virginia for a couple days, and it's absolutely beautiful up there. If you've ever been to Roanoke, Virginia, the mountains are beautiful. It's just rolling hills. Roanoke's kind of an older town, and it's just absolutely beautiful. So I had a great time up there, and I had another great week. Hope you guys are doing well. We are inching ever so closer to spring. I think I made a post a couple days ago about, we're only 38 days, 35 days or so from sunsets after 7 p.m., which is awesome because that means, I get to start doing stuff outside whenever I get home from work, which I really enjoy. Nothing worse than getting up in the morning, going to work and it's dark, and coming home when it's dark. But that's okay. We're gonna get there eventually. So what are we gonna talk about today? I've got a really good podcast planned for us. So I do, as you guys know, I do lawn coaching, and I'm thinking about adding a service to my coaching where I actually not only coach, but I want to start doing some spraying. And so I'm looking into getting my professional spray license to be able to spray herbicides, pesticides, and things like that, and lawns. I think that would be a lot of fun. Spraying is something that I really enjoy, and I think that I could make some money doing it. And it'd be fun. So in order to do that, there's a certification test that you have to take, and there's a book that I borrowed from a friend. It's called the Ornamental Turfgrass Pest Management book, and it's kind of the study guide of what's on the test. And we're going to take a really deep dive today into diseases of turfgrass, and I thought that'd be fun. We're gonna go to the deep end of the pool, so I hope you're ready. That'll be fun. But so before we get going into that, we have to do this week's mindful moment. So let's get into that first.
It can be hard to slow down and notice things in a busy world. Mindful moments is where we pause for a moment to reflect on the here and now. After all, life is happening now. We simply need to take time to notice. These small yet profound experiences remind us that life is not about the destination, but the journey we take to get there.
So this week's mindful moment is kind of a difficult one. So I'm recording this on a Friday. Again, the week before you guys actually see it, gives me time to edit and all that good stuff. But we had a tragedy strike this week over in DC. We had an American Airlines airplane crash into a military helicopter, and I believe they're saying that everyone on board has passed, which is terrible. It's terrible anytime someone loses their life, especially these innocent people. These folks left and didn't know that today was going to be their last day on Earth, and it's terrible. So my thoughts and prayers to everyone involved. I know I've got friends, 3 or 4 really good friends that are actually American airline pilots, and that really, this event really hit close to home. Of course, I've talked about, the appreciation for what folks do in the military. Again, just because you're not in combat doesn't mean that you're not in harm's way. And so I think the military aircraft was performing some tests or some training and something. And it's a tragedy all around. Whether whose fault it was or whatever, to me, that doesn't matter. It's just a tragedy that those folks lost their life. And so today's mindful moment presents a question that I think about a lot. I know I'm pretty sure you do too, but the question is, why do bad things happen to good people? And these folks that that left and got on that plane or got in that helicopter, while sure they're not, they're sinners just like me. But the question is, why did this happen? Why does God allow bad things to happen to good people? I mean, these people weren't doing anything wrong. They were just taking an airline trip to maybe go home and see their family. So why does he allow things like that to happen? And, first of all, I want to say, I believe that we live in a fallen world. We live in a world where we are separated from God. And my pastor always makes the comparison that we're all of us, whether you believe or whether you don't believe, have jumped out of an airplane and you don't have a parachute, and eventually you're going to hit the ground. Now, if you want a parachute and you want to be saved from the inevitable, right? It's going to happen. There's only one person who has a parachute that can save you, and that is our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. And if you choose not to believe, that's okay. You're going to die just like I'm going to die. However, the difference is Jesus tells you that there's life beyond death. And so what does that have to do with why bad things happen to good people? Well, this is an absolute tragedy of what happened. And, but I believe that we as humans, we would never change. We would never change our course if bad things didn't happen. And so, I don't know if you guys feel about spanking children or disciplining your kids, but we do discipline our children in our house, and there's no motivator like pain, and I know God knows that too, and I know He doesn't want bad things to happen to folks, and I don't want bad things to happen to my kids, but I can tell you as a parent, my child is not going to change if he doesn't feel some pain, if he doesn't feel like there's no consequence for your actions, and he's never going to change. Well, I am no different when in God's eyes, I believe. I look at my life and, I know it's true, because when good things happen to me, I am a sinner too. And the last thing I do, or I know it's the first thing I should do, but it's I'm not perfect. But when good things happen to me, the last person that I think to give credit to is God, and understanding that He's the one who did it all. Now, I try to do that, but I'm not perfect. And so I know that, I think about, loved ones, my mom, my dad, my wife, we go through our day-to-day activity and we're busy and life happens and we got all this stuff going on, and without the fear of knowing that they could soon be gone, how would I treat them? How do I approach the day? How do I, you know what I mean? And so when God allows these things to happen, I know He doesn't want them to happen, but we wouldn't change. We would never stop and appreciate what we have if we were ever fearful that it would ever go away. Because that's just the way we are. We live, like I said, in a broken world, in a fallen world where we're separated. And so I believe that He allows bad things to happen because we would never change regardless. And this thing that happened in DC is terrible. Any tragedy, anybody who loses their life innocent is awful. And my thoughts and prayers go to all the families that were involved. It's terrible. But, this week's mindful moment is just, I guess be appreciative of what you have, and, understand that, bad things do happen to good people. But if that didn't happen, we would never change. So that's this week's mindful moment. Hope you guys enjoyed it.
The first video we want to show you, the bright light that you see at the top is the American Airlines jet as it approached the runway. Then you see the helicopter flying directly into the frame. and directly into the plane. Both aircraft immediately then crashing down into the Potomac River. The second video, it appears to be surveillance video from the airport and showing the very same helicopter moving along the river as the plane approaches the runway at DCA, and then the collision and the explosion and into the Potomac River.
All right, so let's get in to the podcast. We're gonna, like I said, we're gonna go a little bit deeper into the deep end of the pool. So I hope you guys are ready. So we're gonna, like I said, I've got this book, and I'm gonna kind of read through it a little bit, and then we'll stop and we'll talk about it. So I think it'll be fun. Again, this is the Ornamental and Turfgrass Pest Management book that I got from the University of North Carolina. Speaking of North Carolina, I do want to mention that my Duke Blue Devils beat NC State. That was a great game, by the way. We play the Tar Heels on Saturday, so rooting for that. Pete, if you're listening or watching, you guys are going to struggle this week. But anyway, let's get into it. So let's talk about turfgrass disease. So diseases are the most difficult turf pest problem to diagnose and manage. Often the disease-causing organism is not visible, and the symptoms that are clearly visible could be caused by several different diseases or disorders. We talk about how just properly identifying the pest, whether it's a disease or a disorder, is extremely important. And the very first line, diseases are probably the most difficult turf pest problem to diagnose and manage. 100% without question, they are. They all look similar, and we'll kind of dive into them a little bit, but they all look similar. And if you think you have one thing and you're treating for that, it's not gonna fix it. So it's extremely difficult to diagnose and manage. Disorders are caused by unfavorable growing conditions such as temperature extremes, soil compaction, injury from machines or chemicals, too little or too much water, fertilizer or light. Disorders are not infectious and cannot be spread from plant to plant. So when we're talking about disorders, we're talking about things like what I call maybe your cultural practices, right? Sharp mower blades. Having dull mower blades is going to cause a disorder. It's going to cause your grass to be less strengthened. It's going to cause the grass blades to fray. It's going to cause it to lose water, things like that. And those disorders are not spread from plant to plant. One plant's dull grass blade is not going to affect the other plant. From a disorder standpoint, things like overwatering that cause thatch, those are all disorders. Those are all things caused by unfavorable growing conditions, like drought stress. Those are all disorders, okay? Then you have diseases, which, again, the most difficult turf pest problem to diagnose and manage are diseases. Diseases are caused by pathogens such as fungi or fungi. Is it a fungi or a fungi? I don't know. We're going to go with fungi because I like that word. Makes me sound more professional. Bacteria, viruses, which can multiply and spread from plant to plant. All right, so diseases spread from plant to plant and disorders do not. Okay, important to remember. Pathogens are usually microscopic nematodes, tiny roundworms, often grouped with pathogenic organisms, although they are not necessarily microscopic. Fungi and nematodes cause most turfgrass diseases. Very few diseases caused by bacteria or viruses cause serious damage to turf. Okay, all right. So what are some examples of diseases? Okay, so that is brown patch, snow mold. They list some other ones. Fairy ring, dollar spot, all that. Those are all diseases. Those are pathogens such as fungi, bacteria, or viruses, okay? So there's a difference, disease and disorders. All right, so let's talk about what you need for disease development. And it goes into say that there is a disease requires four things to be present. It needs a susceptible host. So that is your plant or your turf grass. It needs a disease-causing pathogen, which is the actual disease itself. The environmental conditions must be favorable as well. So usually we always say that that's heat and humidity, right? And then it needs time. So without those four, you cannot have a disease, right? You can't have it. It won't spread from plant to plant. If you have three of the four, you won't have a disease, right? If you only have two of the four, you got to have all four. And the relationship among these factors is usually described as the disease pyramid. So if you're watching on YouTube, I'll throw up a little graphic of the disease pyramid so you can kind of see that. And if you're listening on Spotify, well, go check it out on YouTube. So if any one of these factors is missing, I already said that, no disease will occur. This means that when you're trying to manage disease, you will look for ways to eliminate one of these factors. Well, isn't that interesting? So if we can eliminate one of these, we can then thus control the pathogen, right? So what do we typically do to control the pathogen? Well, we can't change the host, right? Well, I guess we can. No, we can. We can change the host. So that comes down to your grass type, right? So you can change that. Environment, can you change your environmental conditions? To a little bit of a degree, yes, you can. If the environment, the fungus is being caused by your grass staying wet because it's in a shaded area, well, you could certainly remove the tree or increase the airflow to help dry out the area. Kind of goes along with time. Yeah, you can change that. So, but the main one that we like to do is throw down a fungicide, which basically the fungicide is just going to take care of the pathogen itself. So we're going to remove, you think about a chair, right? You imagine sitting in a chair that only has 3 legs, you're going to fall over, right? So, a chair with the 4 legs is going to stand up nice and tall and strong. And so that's really what they're saying. If you remove one of the legs of the chair, you don't have a chair anymore. All right. So diseases are the most severe when conditions are favorable for the pathogen to develop. All right. Cultivars. We talked about this just a second ago. Make sure the cultivar is one of the well adapted to the site and its use. If renovation is necessary, select resistant cultivars when available. So that goes back to making sure you are choosing the right grass type for your area. Pete with GCI Turf, if you followed him last year, he planted some bluegrass, and you can by all means grow bluegrass here in the South. But I think he dealt a lot with some fungus there, and sure, you can grow the grass there, but that particular cultivar, for whatever reason, at that particular season with those environmental conditions, it struggled. And that's true, right? Fertilizer and pH. Have a soil test done to check whether nutrient levels in the soil pH are appropriate for that cultivar. Soil pH plays a role in fungus development. Sharp blades, we talk about that. Look at leaf blade tips to see if they're shredded from dull mower blades. Split ends heal slowly and offer an injury point for pathogens. Another reason why I preach having sharp mower blades. Mowing height. Check your mowing height for turf species. Disease tend to be more common in grasses under stress from being mowed too short. Always mow at or near the maximum recommended height for your species. So what that's saying is if tall fescue prefers to be grown at 3 to 4 inches, grow on the tall end of that, especially when the stress is going to be the highest. So so that's managing the host, right? So now we're going to talk about managing the environment. And there's really, they classify 5 different ways to manage the environment. Number 1 is irrigation. Proper irrigation plays a major factor in disease management. As a general rule, we always want to water deep and infrequent. It's funny, guys. I mean, this is all what we talk about. And again, this is coming from the professionals. This is not Devin's opinion. These are the professionals, right? Watering too frequently produces shallow root plants and stimulates development for disease. 100%. Airflow. Most diseases are more likely to occur in areas with limited air movement. So trim your bushes, low-hanging branches, All right, we got to get air circulating. You ever go on a golf course and you see those big fans by the greens? Do you know why they're there? It's not to keep you cool. It's for airflow. It's because they know the bent grass greens need airflow to prevent fungus damage. So they turn them on, keep the air moving, and that's how they're managing their environment. Drainage. Grass plants grow best in well-drained, well-aerated soils. Aerated. Good drainage helps reduce disease. Makes sense. Compaction, soil compaction restricts root growth and reduces the amount of water that can soak into the soil. When the root zone gets completely saturated with water, the roots may die and the disease may develop. We talk about thatch. A thick layer of thatch creates an excellent environment for disease or organisms to multiply and spread, right? Because it's retaining the moisture. All right, so then they kind of talk about a way to manage the pathogen. And this is typically what we always reach for as DIYers. We go for the fungicide. So this is how you manage the pathogen. And they break it down into two different fungicides. And there are protectants and there's systemics. So protectants are what we call contact fungicides, right? So spray it on there and it kills the bacteria. Think of it like mouthwash. You got bad breath, put mouthwash in there, gargle around, done, right? Gets rid of the bad breath. You're killing the bacteria present, then you spit it out, right? Move on about your day. So that is a contact. A systemic is more like when you have a headache and you take Tylenol, right? And it works through your blood system, and that's how it stops the pain receptors, right? That's more a systemic. Protectant or contact fungicides work well in turf because they're broad spectrum activity. So that just means that they have a wide range. It prevents infection by several different fungi because they are not prone to disease-resistant problems. A major disadvantage of protectants is they do not protect new plant growth as they emerge after treatment. So, just like we talked about the mouthwash, after you rinse your mouth out, you're only good for that moment in time, right? So as you go about the day, the bacteria kind of continues to grow and develop and multiply. So you're not protected. So when you spray a contact herbicide or a contact fungicide, then it only kills what's there as time goes on and that new plant develops, and it's going to continue to develop. They also have a barrier. The barrier is easily washed off by rain, swept away by mowing, and degraded with sunlight and microbes. Makes sense, right? You're spraying it on the leaf. When you cut the leaf off and the leaf falls down to the canopy of the grass or the ground, right? That seems to make sense. Degraded by sunlight and microbes makes sense. So during periods of disease development and spread, reapplication may be necessary every 5 to 10 days. So those are your protectants, your contacts, fungicides. Then you have what are called systemic. Now, typically I use systemic fungicides, but systemic fungicides circulate or translocate within the turf grass. Again, it's like taking a pill for your headache, right? You take it in your mouth and it works through your bloodstream and gets rid of your headache. They generally provide longer periods of residual disease growth, since most of the fungicide is absorbed through the cuticle or the waxy outer layer of the plant in several hours, and it can't be washed off by rain, right? It's inside the plant. So you can't wash it off, you can't cut it off. And they can't be degraded by sunlight. Here's another major advantage to a systemic versus a contact. A systemic fungicide will also protect the roots, crowns, and any newly formed tissue. So that's why we mostly reach for systemic. Because systemic fungicides act in a specific way against the target pathogen, there's a greater likelihood that the fungicide resistance will develop. That's a downside. Fungicide resistance occurs when naturally occurring strains of a pathogen are not controlled by a particular fungicide buildup over time. To extend the useful life of systemic fungicides, it is a good idea to rotate them among different products to tank mix systemics with protectants, fungicides, where they're available. So we talk about mixing different fungicides together, different what we call modes of action, and what that is that gives, that think about if you were going to break into a bank. Imagine trying to break into a vault that had lasers and cameras, and it had the actual vault had its own security system, and all these different layers of protection. Well, each layer of protection, each mode of action makes it harder for that fungi to break through and get into the plant, and that's really what you're doing. And so we don't want to develop resistance to that. So if you're trying to break into a bank and every single time you just have to get by the laser, right? You can figure that out. Well, the fungus will figure it out. So let's talk about signs and symptoms, okay? So when you notice plant injury, the first thing to do is determine whether it's due to the damage caused by the disease or by some cultural or environmental condition. If you decide that the problem is a disease, you need to find out which one. And that is extremely important. Identifying what fungus you think you're dealing with. And now I'm not saying it's easy. It is not easy, but it's crucial because that's going to determine how you're going to take care of it. Okay. Knowing exactly which disease is present will help you select and manage practices that can reduce turf damage. We talked about with Alan when we were together about integrated pest management. And, we always typically want to run and throw something down, and that's not always advisable. Sometimes you can control these pathogens, these diseases, just with your cultural practices. So my advice to you is obviously we want to take care of the disease, but look at your cultural practices. Make sure you're watering right. Make sure you're mowing right. Make sure your blades are sharp. All the things that we've talked about. And that will significantly reduce the pressure on your grass. Look at your trees around your turf. Could you lift the canopy, allow more airflow? All the things that we've talked about. Different pathogens favor different grasses. Many of them also tend to be associated with distinct weather conditions such as cold, snow mold, wet or humid, hot and humid weather. So when you're trying to diagnose them, you will need to determine what kind of grass is affected and what recent weather conditions like humidity, day, night temperatures have been present. A great reason to keep a lawn journal. It's, I preach that a lot, but what have you been applying? What's been going on in the lawn? All that stuff, because when you get that pathogen or you get that happening, you want to say, well, when was the last time I fertilized? When was the last time I watered? When was the last time I did this? Because you turn into a detective. You have to try to figure out what's causing it. And then you look at, okay, well, I have XYZ grass type. That means I'm susceptible to XYZ fungus, and I'm watering because it's hot and developing the disease because humidity is staying high, and you become a detective. And that leads you down the path of trying to figure out what's causing it and then what you're going to do about it. So usually diagnosis can be carefully done by examining the symptoms rather than identifying the pathogen itself. Isn't that interesting? So usually diagnosis is made by carefully examining the symptoms rather than identifying the pathogen. So when I get brown patch and I'm like, is this brown patch? Well, looking at the symptoms, right? Remember we talked about what symptoms are. When symptoms of a cold are sneezing, coughing, fever, right? Those are symptoms. I don't know that it's a cold. I don't know that I have the flu, but I sure have the symptoms. All right. So what are the symptoms of brown patch, right? So identify the symptoms. Symptoms are stand symptoms are symptoms of turf grass that are evident from a disease. Example stand symptoms are spots, circles, patches, and rings. So when you look at brown patch, you look at that dark black ring on your turf grass, and that is a clear indicator of brown patch. Plant symptoms are evident on the individual plant. Examples of plant symptoms are leaf spots, lesions, stems, foliar blight. What's the difference between, brown patch and leaf spot? They kind of look the same, but if you look at the symptoms of them and you really examine the grass really carefully, you can easily identify what the pathogen is without having to take the grass blade to a lab and have them actually test it, right? Like when you get sick, you have the flu because you have the symptoms of a cold, right? You don't necessarily need to go to the doctor and have them actually do a flu test. You know that you have the flu. You know what that feels like, the body aches, right? All that stuff. So each turfgrass disease produces a very specific stand symptom and plant symptom. Carefully examining the symptoms can also help you tell the difference from different disorders, which do not produce distinct symptoms. Signs will be very helpful for diagnosing a disease. Look for mushrooms, white powdery mildew, red or black pulsatiles on the leaves, mycelium, which look like cobwebs on the grass. Right? A lot of times I'm guilty of that, thinking I've got mycelium, and it's actually not mycelium. It is actually spider webs. It's made up. So mycelium is the microscopic thread structures that are of the vegetative body of fungus. I told you guys we were going in the deep end of the pool. Spores of the microscopic seed-like structures arise from stalks and branches of the mycelium. When the symptoms of other pieces of information, such as visible signs and environmental conditions, do not provide clear diagnosis, you should seek help from the cooperative extension in your county. And that is another thing that I am a huge believer in. Get some help, right? These diseases, these pathogens, they spread rather quickly. And if you don't know what you're doing and you're throwing down fungicide because you think you have something and you've misidentified it, you're wasting a bunch of money and you're wasting time. So I always encourage you to get with your local turf extension office here. It is NC State. So depending on where you live, find out what that is. You could do that quickly on a quick Google search. Send them an email. Find out your contacts. Say, hey, if I ever had a problem, who do I contact? Because I promise, and I've done this several times. I've had, issues in the lawn, and I wasn't sure what pathogen I was dealing with. Turns out it was leaf spot, but the turf pathologist was able to help me determine. He told me exactly what I needed to do, and it worked out perfectly. So then it goes into some common diseases, brown patch, fairy ring, dollar spot, large patch. And I think what I'm going to do for the podcast is we're going to kind of take a deep dive, because I think this is kind of cool. We're going to take a deep dive into some of the more popular ones, especially the brown patch, probably maybe even the dollar spot, possibly even fairy ring, because that is another cool season pathogen, and then gray leaf spot would probably be the last one. So maybe we'll break it up into two different podcast series, I guess, and we'll talk about and kind of take a deep dive into the different turfgrass diseases. If that's something that you want me to do, please, leave me a comment down below. Send me an email at thediylawncoach.com. Let me know that that's something that you want to do. But when it comes to diseases and turfgrass management, diseases are extremely hard to control. But if you listen to not only my advice, listen to the advice of the professional, concentrate on your integrated pest management, make sure your cultural practices are correct, and it will significantly reduce the amount of fungicides that you need. But at the end of the day, as long as you've got those four factors, that we talked about, the disease triangle, the pathogen is going to be there. And sometimes we need fungicides to help us correct. Even though I'm doing everything I can in my own lawn to make sure that I'm mowing right, I got sharp blades, sometimes Mother Nature just throws the gauntlet at me, and the only thing I can do is throw fungicide at it to help reduce some of the spores of the pathogen. Because at the end of the day, there's only so much I can control. And so all I'm trying to do with these fungicides is remove, like we talked about earlier, try to remove one of the legs of that chair so that pesticide, fungus doesn't have anywhere to live. So I hope you guys enjoyed the podcast this week. Again, I know it was a little bit of a deep dive, a little bit something different. If you liked it, give the video a like and leave me a comment down below and let me know if you want me to go into some of those other, a little bit more in depth. I'd greatly appreciate it. I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your week. And we'll talk to you guys next week. My name is Devin. I am the DIY lawn coach, and I can't wait to see you in the lawn. Peace.